Hello guys, what is up? I'm Ivan Gomez and this is the first episode of Code With Me, the series I created so we have the chance to spend more time together building some cool front-end web development projects. This is an experimental project to me, so let me know in the comments section below if you enjoy this type of video. So let me show you the project that we are going to build together today. This is a very versatile type of UI element. You can use for other things like product categories, you can use for blog posts, for news articles in a newspaper website. We can see a zoom effect in the background image, and we can also see the title and caption moving up a bit. So putting all these things together gives us this very nice and smooth hover effect. Let's check the other cards. They behave the same way. So this is the project that we are going to build together today. Now, another thing that I'm leaving in the description below is the Figma design. So you can check fonts, colors, and things like that. Having said all that, let's go straight to Visual Studio Code so we can start working on the project. So right here we have a basic HTML skeleton. I don't have anything written inside the body yet. I just have the basic HTML structure, a link to a CSS file, which is empty. And the most important thing in this initial version are the image files. Please check the link for this initial version in the description of the video. I'm going to click Go Live. If you're not seeing this button, it's probably because you don't have the live server extension yet. So just go to the extensions panel, search for live server, and install this one that was built by Ritwik They. After you do that, you need to close and reopen Visual Studio Code, and you should see the Go Live option. So once we click Go Live, we are going to run the project in the web browser. So we are ready to get started. So let's go to Visual Studio Code, and the first thing I'm going to do here is to add a section element, which is going to be the parent element for that whole section. Let's go back to the prototype so we can check a few things. The first thing we can see here is that this section has some paddings. So we have 85 showing at the top here, and we also have 85 at the bottom. So let's apply that to all the sections of the page. I always like doing that so we have consistency. So let's go back there. Let's also get the color for the background right here. So I'm going to copy this X code, go back there, and I'm going to apply this globally. So for all section elements of my page, I'm going to set the padding top and bottom to 85 pixels and 0 to the sides. Now I'm not going to set the background color here because normally different sections will have different background colors. So I'm going to apply the background color to this section specifically. So for this one, I'm going to add an ID of, let's say, featured. So let's use this ID. And for this specific section that has the ID of featured, I'm going to add the background color. And here we have it. So we can save this. We can go back there, and now we can see the section showing right here. We only have the padding so far. So let's write something so we can see what is going on. I'm going to type something like product. We can go back there, and now we can see where the content is showing. We can see the padding top, padding bottom, and we can also see that the body has some margins and paddings. So let's remove them before we do anything else. So going back to Visual Studio Code, let's get the body and reset those default values. So margin 0, padding 0. We save this, we go back there, and now we don't have that space anymore, so we are ready to continue. And another thing I want to do from the absolute beginning is to create the page container. So if we go back here, you will see that there is a 12 column grid. So let me click this icon to show it. So as you can see, that section is never going to be bigger than this page container. We have the background covering 100% of the screen, but the content of this section will fit inside this page container. Now I'm going to press R to create a rectangle. I'm going to start a rectangle right here, all the way until the end. And we can see that the width of this page container is 1180. So going back to the project, I'm going to create a container class. And I'm going to set the max width of 1180. We also need to set margin auto so it stays on the center of the page. And I'm going to apply a border just so we can see this element. We can remove this border later. So 1 pixel solid red. Now going back to the HTML file, let's put a container inside this section. So div.container, and inside the container we can write product. And now let's go check what is going on. So this is the project. As you can see, we have the page container, which means that the elements are not going to be wider than this, which is good. And this is a page container that you can use throughout your project to make sure that everything is going to be correctly aligned to the left and right sides. This is good. We are making some progress. The first thing we can do here is to add this title. Let's start this H2 right here. Let's add the title of the section, which is what's new. And then inside here, we can add another element that we are going to add the products later. So we can call this items. And now inside here, we are going to add an unordered list. And I'm going to add a new list item. I'm going to type product 1 or category 1. Those are not actually products. So product 1, 2, and 3. Let's save this. Let's go back there to see what is going on. So now we have the title and we have the products that we are going to start designing in a moment. One thing I like doing is to always reset the default styles for lists. So we need to remove margins and paddings and also the bullet point. So for all ULs, we are going to remove all margins, paddings, and also the list style type. We are going to set it to none. We do this, we go back there, and now we don't have the default styles for lists anymore. So let's go back to the design on Figma, and we can see that we have 3 items per row, which means that each of them will have around 33.3% of the screen. Of course, there are some margins right here, which we're going to have to compensate, but let's forget about the margins right now. Let's just add the width so they take 1/3 of the available space. And when we do this and add the height, we're going to have something closer to a card, which is what we are looking for. So we have 372 of height. So let's go there to do it. So for those items, let's remember that we have this section. And by the way, guys, I'm going to place this down here. And one thing I'm going to do here is to use CSS nesting. This is something that we developers have been waiting for a long time to have this native in CSS. Before that, we only had it available on Sass, Lass, and these CSS preprocessors. But now nesting is native in CSS. So I'm going to build this project using nesting. So inside this featured section, we have that list. So instead of doing what we normally did in the past, which is to select the parent element first and then the UL we have inside and the li, instead of doing that, we are going to nest things. So inside this section, we are going to add the UL. and we will be able to change the display to flex. Now inside the UL, we can list the LIs, and for the LIs, we are going to add the flex basis property, so we can set its width to 33.33% to make it get 1/3 of the available space. And we are also going to add the flex wrap property, and we are going to set it to wrap, so the elements, they move to a different line if we have more than 3. Now remember that we had a height of 372 pixels for these items. Let's also add a background color for these items so we can see how they look. I'm going to add this chocolate color. Let's see how it looks. So we go back there, and now we can see product 1, product 2, product 3. Let me add some borders as well so we can see this better. So border 1px solid black. I'm actually going to add a light gray for this, which is going to be better for us to see. So going back there, we can see the product showing. We can see that they are breaking the lines. So one thing you can do here is to change the box sizing property to border box. And when you do that, if you add paddings or borders to your elements, this is not going to affect the total width of the element. So we save this, we go back there, and now we see them showing on the same line. So the borders, paddings, anything you add to these elements when they are border box, they're going to be subtracted from the total width rather than added and make them larger. So we do this, and now we have 3 elements per line, which is exactly what we want. Now, one thing that I like to do here, remember that we resetted the margins and paddings for the body element, and I also like to do this for all the headings and the P elements. So here I'm going to add some commas so we can list more elements. So not only the body, but also all elements from age 1 to age 6. The P elements, and also the UL and LI elements, which means we can remove this from here, so we don't have to repeat code. So this is going to make sure to reset all the default margins and paddings. So we do this, we go back there, and now we can see that the margin is gone, which means we will be able to set the correct margin, which in this case is 24 pixels. Here on Figma, if you press Alt and then you hover over other elements, you will see the distance between these elements. So in this case, we have 24 pixels showing. So let's go there to apply that. I'm not going to apply it inside here because these are all the styles that we are doing for this section specifically. But the margins for the age 2s, I want to set them globally. So if we have other sections, everything will be consistent. So let's go up, and right here, every time we have an age 2 inside the section, we are going to add a margin bottom of 24 pixels. We do this, we go back there, and now we have the correct margin. Let's also apply the font, which is Helvetica. This is a safe web font, so we don't have to download or link any Google fonts. We can use the system font. So let's go back there and right here. So I'm going to set the font family to Helvetica with a fallback for the sans serif. We can save this. Let's go back there to check. Now we need to set the margins for the products. So going back there, we can go again to the LI. And inside the LI, I'm going to add a link element. And the reason why I'm going to add a link element is because most likely when you have cards like that, they are links to other pages. So in this case, we are going to make these cards links. So I'm going to write product 1 inside. Let's adjust the rest of the LIs as well. So this is product 2, and we have product 3. Now going back there, instead of adding the border and the background color for the LIs, I'm going to remove them from here. I'm going to add them for the links inside these LIs so we can see them better. And I'm going to add some paddings. I'm going to add, let's go to the prototype just so we can see the space we have here. We have, let's consider 30 pixels. So what I'm going to do here is add 8 pixels, because adding 8 pixels to all corners is going to make sure that all the elements will have a space of 16 pixels between them. All right, so saving this, we go back there, we can see something strange going on. The products are not growing to the dimensions we wanted, but this is because links by default, they are inline elements. So we need to go back there and we need to add the height for the links instead. And we also want to change the display. We can change to block, but since we will need it to be flexbox later, as I will show you, I'm going to change them to flex already. So changing them to flex and adding the heights to them, we will see that now we have what we wanted. Now we have them showing on the same line, so the paddings are not being added to the total width of these elements. The only problem here is that we don't have the same margin or padding for the H2. So what I'm going to do is add the same padding to the H2 so we can make sure that everything is aligned. This is actually a good thing because when we have smaller screens, we will make sure that this element is not going to be touching the edge of the screen. So let's go back there, and for the H2s, I'm going to add some paddings of 0 top and bottom and 8 pixels to each of the sides. We can save this and we can see that everything is now perfectly aligned. All right, so we are making some good progress. Now let's add the background images. If we check the final project, we will see that each of them has a different background image. Remember, when we are starting to learn HTML and CSS, we always say that inline styles shouldn't be used. We should always write all the CSS inside CSS files, except in some specific occasions. And this is an example of a specific occasion where it's okay to set the background image in the HTML element. So right here, I'm going to add a style attribute, and I'm going to add a background image. Let's add the URL, and here we have img / the first one is running. Let's just save this to see if this is working. We can see the image showing here. So let me just break a few lines, minimize this bar so we see the code better. I'm going to do the same thing for the other ones. So for this, and for the last one, I'm going to add the coach image. We save this, we go back there, and we can see the correct images showing. If you check the right corner of this element, we can see the background starting to repeat. So let's make sure to set the background size correctly. Going down here inside the A element, so here we can change the background size to cover or contain. In this case, let's just use cover, and we will make sure that the image will fit perfectly inside these elements so we don't have that line at the right corner anymore. Now let's add the border radius. So if we select the elements on Figma, we can see here that we have 20 pixels of border radius. Let's go back there and let's add the border radius to 20 pixels. Now I think we can already remove the border, especially now that we have the background image. We can also remove the background color. We save this. We go back there. And now this is starting to look more like the prototype. I think we can already remove the border for the container as well. So let's do that. Let's go to the container. Let's remove the border. If you want to comment, so maybe you can bring it back later, you can use Ctrl+Shift+7 to toggle the comment. And you can leave it here. If you want to add the border back to the container, you can just go back here and press Ctrl+Shift+7 again. So you toggle the comment. So we do this and we don't see that anymore. So we are almost there. Now we need to place the text in the correct place of the image. And this is why I set a display of flex, because with Flexbox it's much easier to bring it down. Instead of going to Visual Studio Code, let me do this straight from the inspector. So if we select the link element, we can see it has a display of flex. So if we go here and we define the flex direction to column instead of a row, this is going to make the elements be stacked on top of each other rather than side by side. And this is important because then we can add the justify content to flex end, and we are going to push that text to the bottom of the element. So we can do this. We can see it shown below. So let's copy these two properties. Let's apply them. And of course, there are a few more things that we have to do. But first, let me go to the link element and let me add those two lines. Now, if we go back to the prototype, we will see we actually have a title and some text below. So let's make sure to add both of these. Going to the HTML, instead of adding them right here, I'm going to create another element inside card content. This is going to be important because later you will see that we will need to have an overlay so we can read the text more easily. I'm going to add an H3 since we already used the H2 above. So this is running club. And then we have a P element. Let's get this text from the prototype. Now I'm going to copy this for the other ones as well. So for product 2 and for product 3, let me just change the text. This one is street basketball and this is the P element. Street basketball, and then we have soccer coach with this text. The content of the P tag. Let's save this. Let's go back there. Now we can see the text showing. Let's see the paddings we have here, or margins. I'm going to press Ctrl+ to zoom in. You can press Ctrl+ and Ctrl- to change the zoom. And if you want to navigate inside, you can just press spacebar and then click and drag. Now inside here, I'm going to select this element and I'm going to press Alt so I can see the paddings. We can see we have 26 pixels. So going back there, let me just copy the name of this class that is inside the A. So I'm going to place it inside the A. Remember, we are using nesting, which is something that recently became native in CSS. So inside this A element, I'm going to add a selector for that card content, and I'm going to add paddings on all sides so we can make sure that the content is never going to touch the borders of this card. So 26 pixels to all the sides. We can save this. We go back there and now we can see the paddings. Now, of course, we need to change the colors inside the link. We are seeing that link in purple because that's the color for visited links. So all we have to do is change the color to all links, both visited and not visited, to white. We save this, we go back there, and now we just need to remove the text decoration. Text decoration, none. Save this, and now this is starting to look better. Let's just see the margins that we have here. So this element, we have 6 pixels of margin bottom. So inside the card content, we have an H3 with a margin bottom of 6 pixels. We save this, we go back there, and now this is starting to look very much like the prototype. Now, one thing, I'm not sure if you noticed, if we go to the final version, look how it's much easier to read the text. Now we go here, and this is kind of blending with the background. This is also a very popular technique, which is adding an overlay. So we normally, when we have text over images like this, we can't predict if the images are dark or bright. So the best thing to make sure you will always be able to read the text is to add some overlay. So since we have white text, we can add a dark overlay, and this is going to do the trick. So first, let me add a simple overlay, and then we can change it to a gradient. If we add a background color of black, let's see what happens. We go back there, and we can see that the content of the card is showing down here. The reason why it's showing below is that it's only growing to fit the content. And this is not what we want. We want it to grow to fit the whole space inside the card. So for that, let's go back there, and inside the card content, we can add the height of 100%. We save this, we go back there, and now we can see this showing. So we need to adjust the position here. Since now we have this child element, instead of adding the flex to the A element, we can do it for the card content instead. So for the A, it can be block, and we are going to turn the card content flex instead, so that we can align the item at the end of it like we had before. We save this, we go back there, and now we see this overlay, which of course now it's completely black. But once we have this, we could change this to RGBA, and we could use something like 000 for black, and the transparency could be something around 0.6, not the transparency, but the opacity, which is the opposite. So 0.6 should make it easier to read the text. We save this, we go back there, and now we're having a problem here because since this element has a padding and we defined a specific height for it, the padding is going to be subtracted from the height. Let's remember that we can reset that by changing the box sizing. So for the card content, we can change the box sizing to border box, just like we did above. And this is going to mean that this element is going to have the 100% of height, and this is the final size. This is not going to be affected by the padding. So we can save this, we go back there. Since we have an overlay, this element needs the same border radius as the parent element. So going back there, so now let's get the border radius and let's add it to the card content as well. We save this, we go back there, and now we can see the borders showing correctly. And now I'm back here. I'm sorry, I had a little problem with my camera, so the video was off, but now everything is back to normal again. This is starting to look good, but if we go to the final project, we will see that we don't have an overlay covering the whole image. What we have is just a gradient below, and we can easily achieve that with a gradient. I'm going to leave Visual Studio Code on the side like this, and I'm going to decrease the size of the window so we can make some tests. So let's change, instead of having a background color like we did before, I'm going to use the background property instead, and I'm going to add a linear gradient. I'm going to break some lines, and the way this is going to work is the following. We're going to add some colors and where we want them to start and end. So for example, I'm going to add RGBA. I'm going to set it at 000 for black and 1, so it doesn't have any transparency. And I'm going to say that I want this starting on 0%. Now, we can add comma and we can add as many of these as we want. So I'm going to add another line of this, but this one is going to be 100%. Now let me add the semicolon here, save this, and now we can see that we have this completely black. This is because we are starting with a full black color, we are ending with it. So if we change this to 0 instead, so this is the opacity of it. Now we can see that this is starting with full black and this is ending with something completely transparent. So what we want is the opposite of this. We want to start it at 0 and we only want it to be black at the end. So at the end, we are going to finish this with the full black color. We save this now, we can see this is starting to look like the final version. Now we don't have the overlay at the top of the image, only when we reach the end. Now one thing you can do here is to adjust. So if you want the black color to start only on a specific location, one thing you can do is the following. You can say that from 0 to 40%, this is going to be completely without any overlay. Now when you reach 60%, then we are going to change this to 0.5, and from 60 to 100, this is going to go from 0.5 to 1 of opacity. We save this, and now we can see that we have a bigger part of the image showing, and only below we see this getting dark. We can see that now this is much easier to read. Now if you want to change this to maybe 50% instead, or 80%, if we change to 80, we can see that it gets dark much closer to the bottom of the card. So this is a matter of making some tweaks and find something that looks good to you. I'm going to leave it like this so I can increase the size of it again. And now we have the overlay ready. Now let's work on the final part, which is the hover animation. This is going to be super simple to do. Now let's remember that we added the background images to the link elements. So this is where we're going to have to set the zoom effect. Now remember that when we didn't use nesting in CSS, we would have a selector for the A like this, and then below we would have a selector for the hover states, just like that. But now we are using nesting, but we shouldn't worry because with nesting, we can actually do that. So inside the A, if we want to list an extra class or pseudo class instead of a child element, because I could add an element here that is a child of the A, but that's not what we want. We want to add a specific class of the A element, in this case a pseudo class. So we can use the and symbol and then we add the class or the pseudo class. All right, so on hover, what we want to do is the following. We want to change the background size. So we had the background size to cover, but we are actually going to change this to 100% instead of cover because we want to add the effect when we hover over the element. So when we are hovering over, we are going to change the background size to 120%. We save this, we go back there and let's check it out. So we have it showing, but this is not smooth. So we need to add a transition to make it smooth. So we are going to add a transition. 0.5 is fine. 0.5s for seconds. Now we can save this. We can test it out. Now this is looking better, but it's not centralized. To make it zoom in a centralized way. We just need to change the background position to center. And now we go back there and we can see that nice hover effect for the images. We can see it's working for all elements. Now the only thing we need to do is to add the effect for the captions as well. So going back to Visual Studio Code, let's remember that we have the card content. We just need to be a bit careful here, because if we move the card content, then we are going to move the overlay as well. We can make a test here inside the hover state. We can select the card content, and then we can add a transform property. Let's use the translate Y, and we are going to move it 10 pixels to the top, so minus 10 pixels. And to the card content, I'm going to add the transition as well, so this happens smoothly. So all 0.5 seconds. We save this, we go back there, and now as you can see, we have the effect, but the overlay is moving as well. So instead of adding it to the card content, we are going to add it individually to the H3 and the P tags. So let's change that. Instead of adding it to the card content, we are going to change it to the H3 and also the P. So both of them will move, and the transition is going to have to be set for them as well. So here we have the H3, and let's add it to the P as well. We save this, we go back there, and now we can see this project finalized. So I hope you liked building this project with me. Don't forget to support this initiative by hitting the like button and subscribing to the Web Schools. If you have suggestions for projects I can build on next episodes, I may feature your project here in this series. So I hope you liked this video. I'm Ivan Gomez, this is the Web Schools, and I will see you next time.